Overtime was created by Matt Holman, founder of the EMW Foundation, and is made possible by the Prodigy Media Group and RPM Athlete Performance, with inspirational credit to my friend, Dr. Fred Obi. Welcome to Overtime, an open conversation series on racism in the sport of lacrosse. We hope you find this thought-provoking, educational, and it leaves you better prepared as a member of the lacrosse community. Thanks again for joining us, and now for this week's panel. All right, welcome to tonight's show. We're going to have a conversation between two current players, I think you know, and we're going to kind of let them take over the conversation and chat like they were almost together, which they're not. But first we have Max Adler. Max was born and raised in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He first experienced lacrosse through a middle school club program there in Florida before heading off to boarding school at Northfield Mount Herman in Massachusetts. He went on to play and graduate with a degree in corporate finance and accounting from Bentley University, and he currently serves as a financial analyst for ESPN. So welcome, Max. And then we have Isaiah Davis Allen, who was born and raised in Springfield, Virginia. He was introduced to lacrosse while in Summit, New Jersey, when visiting his aunt, which is my hometown. Go Toppers! I had to get that in there. He's a graduate of the University of Maryland with a degree in Geographic Information Systems. He's a current player in the MLL for the Bayhawks. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for taking the time tonight, and we're going to jump right in. Something I've taken a couple weeks off from this discussion myself because it just gets heavy on your shoulders and on your mind. But I'll ask you both, just you can jump in on this. What have you been doing? What kind of conversations have you had the last 2 weeks with your inner circle, like your top 20% of your friends, in regards to racism? And obviously it's just racism in general. It doesn't have to pertain to just lacrosse. And either one of you can start. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess I'll take that one. So my day job, I'm in construction, so like we have a lot of time to kind of talk and like discuss different people's opinion, and I've just tried to be honest and try to understand where everyone's coming from and kind of like their point of view. I feel like something that we need more of nationally is just like an open dialogue and open conversation, and making sure that we're actually paying attention and listening, and not just trying to point the finger. So I've really tried to, work on that. And as, like specific, conversations go, it's kind of hard not to talk about what's going on nationally with, Black Lives Matter and, like several like other groups and kind of where people stand with politics. So been having a lot of those conversations and, trying to do my best to educate myself on as many topics as possible as it comes to race, and just trying to be in the best spot to speak about it. So
All right, Max.
Yeah, so I just think for me especially, it's listening and hearing about different people's experiences, because to be kind of honest, I was pretty naive to the whole situation before all this started happening. And I mean, definitely shame on me in that regard. But, I never looked at like color or gender or anything as, a divider. I've had African-American teammates, Hispanic teammates, every, different teammate. I never looked at it as anything. But then to see everything that's going on, and even if, I've had my own experiences being a Jewish lacrosse player, people saying things, but, it's not about relating my experience. I think it's really important to listen and see how you can help. And that's something I'm really trying to do, is listen as much as possible and, stand up for, what's wrong, and, support, especially guys like, Isaiah, who represent our sport and our league so well. So, just listening to guys like him and just educating myself as much as possible.
What would you say either one of you, what would you say to, well, let's pose it this way. I should probably pose it this way. I'll start with you, Max. You're a player, and you get to your team, and it's a team maybe in a summer all-star team, something like that, where it's not your high school, where you don't know everybody. And you have one or two players of color on that team. What do you think you as a player could do to form an immediate bond with them, with those players of color? And then I'll ask Isaiah the same question. Like, you join a team, you're one of two or three players on a team. What do you think you could do? And let's see where that takes us.
So are you saying I'm one of the players on the team, or I'm coaching the team?
You're one of the players. You're a fellow player.
I mean, I just think being, open and as accepting as possible, letting them know you have their back, and, just making them feel like they're part of the team. But I think, there's a fine line, because you don't want to, single them out and be like, oh, like, I don't know. I've had, Romar Dennis was one of my teammates for the Outlaws in 2018 and was also my roommate and one of my best friends. And I didn't treat him any differently like I treat a white teammate. He happened to be black, but he was, he's one of my best friends, and I talk to him still all the time today. And I don't know, just knowing that, all my teammates know that I have their back no matter what. So I don't know. I think just treating them like, anyone else, and making sure that, whatever they're struggling with, or, if I had a Hispanic teammate who someone was, saying, something to them about being Hispanic, I would stand up for them just like I would stand up for anyone else on my team. So, I think just treating them like, any other teammate, I think is, what I would do personally. I don't know if that's the right or wrong thing to do, but that's how I'd approach it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I would say for me, that would be what I would expect and kind of what I would want. I think you join, any team that you might not know, and maybe it's an all-star team, kind of like you said, where it's more like a touch and go type thing. I would say, I mean, I'd personally want to be treated just as another teammate. Like, I think that, going into a situation, especially as like someone of color, you can't go in expecting like the worst, right? You can't go in expecting like you're going to have to deal with a bunch of stuff, because in my experience, sometimes, and people probably won't like this, but sometimes when you go in with that attitude, you make things that aren't there. So, I mean, I would say that you just need to go in just like another player, just like another teammate. And, guys like Max, like guys will, like be boys, and I've seen it, like give each other a hard time and do the whole intro thing. But at that stage, like, I don't think that anyone needs to be treated, any differently, or I don't think anything else like needs to be said, because at that point, like, you guys are just players.
Oh, I agree. I agree. And I think you said a key point there, Isaiah, is like, you don't want to be treated any differently than other teammates. And that's something that's resonated throughout these conversations I've had. And it's not being treated as a black athlete. It's just like, I'm just a lacrosse player. One of the women that was a college student, she said something to the effect of, why do I have to be a black athlete? Why can't I just be number 12? Like you would say, you would refer to another team like, that number 12 is killing us. You wouldn't say the black player, and those are little things that can add to bigger things. So I appreciate you guys saying that. Isaiah, what's your experience has been overall positive in the game as a black player?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. And I agree with you, and I don't think that people should get angry with you because if you look for something, you will find it, and you'll make it kind of actually come to fruition. If you're actually, that's all you're thinking of, you're going to find something to take offense to. But what in your career, and it's college, professional, have you ever been called the N-word, and how did you react?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, you have to kind of understand my background too, right? Like, I'm from a state that's not necessarily been labeled as the most progressive state, right? Like I'm from down in Virginia, and so before I even started playing this sport, I was playing hockey and I used to swim.
Wow.
So I mean, I was always like the person that was, one of few, not, like I never really took a lot of interest in the basketball or football, even though I did play both. I always felt like when that happened to me the first time, I'd have to go back to probably hockey. When I was really young, because we used to go out to like the Blue Ridge Mountains and play in like Appalachian country, and it would be like people yelling that constantly. And I mean, like my dad would have to go, and people would have to get brought in to make sure that I was safe.
Wow.
So that was probably my first experience with that, and I never felt like anything was up to that level. So I remember that made me very upset as a kid. I was probably 7 or 8 years old. And I brought it up to my grandfather at that point. And, my grandfather, being from that area of Jersey, moved up the mountain. So moved from the bottom side, which is like the historically black neighborhood, up, and was one of the first people to own a house at the top of a mountainside. And I brought it up to him, and he was like, that's really nothing. Like, you have no idea what I had to deal with back in the 30s and 40s. And, you're bringing this BS that really is not, that important. And right or wrong from that standpoint, like people would call it to me like every so often, like not so much now, but definitely, like a few times in college and high school. But I mean, it never really got under my skin at that point. Now, I would say it took up until the national conversation where I started, like thinking about it more, and it happened a lot more like frequently than what I thought, just because I think I was so used to it. And I mean, I would say Max could probably like say the same thing about, people, calling him names about being Jewish. So.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask Max. What's been your experience, Max, on having racial slurs shouted at you or spoken to you playing and being involved?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really people like kind of say things jokingly, which I'll brush off, and people have said things in a game before, but it honestly, it's not. I don't want to compare it to being called the N-word because it's not the same. It's not the same thing. I just don't know. It doesn't really. I can really brush it off. It's not. I don't know. It's not. For me, it doesn't strike that same chord, and I don't think it's as it's just a lot different. And for me, it's not. I don't know. I don't react to it. I just keep playing. But I don't know. I think just the N-word's a lot worse. And that being said, though, thinking about it, I think saying anything, if someone says a slur about a Jewish person, even though it might not bother me, that the next thing they might say, or the next thing someone might say is the N-word or something like that. So I guess that in that regard, it does bother me.
I mean, like I would say, like kind of like my question to Max would be is, I mean, I think for you, I mean, like we get to a certain stage, right, where you've dealt with it kind of growing up, right, and your parents have probably had to deal with certain stuff, as like mine have too. And I think for me, like like the N-word is obviously a horrible word, but it rolls off my back now.
Yep.
And I think a lot of it is just your experience.
Yeah.
So I mean, like my thing is like, all right, like how do I get more, players of color to start playing, the game, and how do I fix a sport that I love so much and kind of, change like that culture? And I think for me, it's addressing any kind of like racial slur. Yeah. And I mean, in that context, I hold both to the exact same weight.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's kind of, as I was thinking about it more, I 100% agree with what you're saying, where, especially wanting to make the sport more inclusive and getting, different backgrounds involved, I mean, none of it can be acceptable.
Correct. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yep, I agree with that.
I mean, what you're both saying is adopt a zero tolerance policy. And I agree with you, Max, because if somebody says something and you can brush it off, that same person most likely is going to be seeking anybody else out that they can, in a weak way, because I think it takes a weak personality to call people these kind of names. And it will, to Isaiah's point, drive young people away from the game. Staying on that same train of thought, as a teammate in a game, you hear one of your teammates getting called a slur, maybe they don't even hear it. What do you think is an appropriate response for you at, let's just say, a high school level, and then you could say a college level? It's totally different. I would think it's totally different responses. If you can think back to high school.
I mean, man, like I don't even know if I have the right answer for it. I mean, I've thought about this a lot, and thought about, all right, if a kid says something to another player, what do I do, especially if that kid's on my team? And I'm in a unique place to where I doubt that would happen on my team because I'm coaching that kid. So, I mean, I would think a kid's not that stupid to say something to another kid knowing his coach is black. But, I mean, I would say first step would be, a kid – or I would assume that the other team's coach would bring it up to me if I didn't hear it. And then I would address it with that kid. And, I think where we get in a lot of trouble is the first question that any coach asks that kid is, well, did you say it or did you not say it? And if the kid says, well, I didn't say it, then it stops at that point. And I don't know if I have a great answer on how to take it past that point. Cause that personally happened to a team I was coaching where someone on the other team called one of my kids the N-word when I was coaching down here in a PG county. And I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I was a young coach. I was fresh out of school. So I went over to their coach and told him what happened. And the coach came back pretty much saying, oh, well, he said he said that he didn't say it, so I don't know what to do. And I mean, just like I said earlier, I don't have a great answer for it. I mean, I would hope, the powers that be would kind of address that and say, okay, you're, you can't play for X amount of weeks, or you can't play at this tournament. Because a very similar thing happened in indoor where someone used a slur, it might have been last year, and half of that player's season got cut short. So I would expect there to be something like that.
Max, your thoughts?
So from a coaching perspective, I don't coach any teams. I just do my face-off clinics. And I don't even, if a kid said the N-word at one of my clinics, I mean, I definitely throw them off the field right away. And I guess it depends what age group it is, because, instinctively I'd be I would never want them to play the sport again. But, if they're just objectively looking at it, if they're coming from a really racist background and there's a chance that they can change with proper education and hearing, understanding exactly why they use that word, and then having them understand the impact and history of that word and how it affects people, I think, it'd be really important for them to experience that. So high school level, I guess, depending on the situation, I'd want to say I'd educate, I try to educate them, but it'd be tough to just say, kick them off the field and tell them to never come back, and let their coaches and parents know. And then college would be completely unacceptable. I really I don't think they should be allowed to play the sport.
Yeah, that's the consensus answer I'm getting is the one thing you can take away as a leader of a program, coach, administrator, what have you, is the ability to play the game. And I think to both your points, the main thing is let's trust our players, and if it happens, let's not doubt them, because that's going to take the wind right out of a young man's sail. And I had that experience with the college MCLA programs that I oversee, but we were lucky enough, I guess lucky, that it happened 2 weekends in a row to 2 different teams. So we knew it was player 25 or whatever his number was, because by the time I was, filtering through the information from the first incident, they had another game and it happened again to 2 different players of different nationalities. And it's shocking, but the main thing we could do is take away that person's ability to play, which is, and try to, obviously the coach wants to teach him a lesson, as Max saying, you want to use it as a teachable moment, but there definitely needs to be a zero tolerance in your program and some way to take away some of that playing time, because that's just reinforcing bad behavior otherwise. What else you got? What's on your mind? I'm gonna let you guys freelance this. I don't want to just keep dictating to you. Max, give me, what's the most uncomfortable conversation you've had in the last month? You don't have to use names, obviously.
The most uncomfortable conversation I've had in the past month. One of the conversations I literally can't even talk about without, it wouldn't be worth discussing without using any names. Isaiah was there, so I think we'll leave it at that. I guess another one is, so I do my face-off clinics, and I'm in West Hartford, Connecticut, which is a really, really wealthy area. And I also coach kids that are from Hartford and are from, Greenwich. So it's a completely, it's a very diverse background I get. I don't get a ton of kids from Hartford though. And one of them, I could tell, just, all the parents driving up in super nice cars, and the face-off, lessons are really, really expensive. So what I said was that, I wanted to do something and reach out and be like, hey, because I like to coach. I do it for fun. I don't do it to make a living. And the uncomfortable conversation that I wasn't sure if I should have or not, but consulted one of my former teammates and friends and was just, how would you approach this situation? Because I didn't want to single the kid out and be like, hey, if you can't afford it, let me know. I can, I'll help you out. But at the same time, it's really expensive. And if it was putting a burden on his family, then I, wanted to say, hey, the kid was a great kid, always listened and learned, and just, I'm happy to have your son here. So what I ended up deciding to do was just to have the difficult conversation. And what I kind of told myself is I'd rather be on the wrong end of it and come from the right place than not say anything at all. So, and it did go well, but even if it wouldn't have went well and they would have felt singled out, I explained where I was coming from, and that's something I would have to live with, but I'd much rather be on the wrong side of it than not say anything. So I guess that's a difficult, conversation and decision I had to make.
No, but I think you said it, you made the effort, and right or wrong, you were coming from a good place.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that kind of spurred me to even spearhead conversations such as this. Was like, I don't have the answers. Just as a black man, I don't have the answers. But I do know that we need equitable conversations and honest conversations. And we need to be acceptant, like I think one of you said in the beginning, you just want to be acceptant of others and listen to their viewpoints. So Isaiah, same question to you. What kind of, you can narrow it down. If you guys want to talk about your locker room situation, as long as.
No, I actually have a pretty good kind of conversation, which I don't think gets talked about a lot. I think with what's going on nationally, that there's a lot more people who will want to get involved with kind of our sport, changing the quote unquote white sport that we play. And so I've been on the phone with, a lot of these politicians, and, most of which are black politicians. And I feel like the overall consensus I got is that they were trying to make a situation that wasn't great worse. And I felt like, and this is my first experience kind of dealing with politics and, and really high up like politicians. I felt like they were more concerned about the optics and how, we looked in the MLL and how like we look nationally than actually trying to make a change. And so obviously like I got in, an argument, like I'm pretty outspoken and I mean, I do think through things. Like I don't let, my emotions kind of drive my thought. And I ended up getting in an argument with someone who's a lot smarter with me or than me. And pretty much saying, look, this is what we're trying to do. This is kind of like the change that I foresee coming. And here's how everyone can help. And here's kind of a message in a letterhead that no one can really argue. And then they just found that as being weak and kind of like whitewashing a bigger issue. And I found as just getting something done that will actually help people. So that was kind of one of the most uncomfortable conversations I've had, because I mean, like for me, like right or wrong, it makes it seem like nationally, this is, maybe this being such like a polarizing topic, we're not actually, putting in policies or anything that's making real change here.
That's interesting that you're talking to a politician. That it's not interesting that they wanted to make it worse, because that seems the way politics goes these days. But I'm glad to hear that you are reaching that level, because again, it could just be, it's just another starting point to affect positive change. I truly believe change will happen if we all push for it, like Max is saying, like you were saying, Isaiah. If we all work together, there's going to be positive change, and the positive change being that the sport becomes more representative of the world that it's existing in.
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of just want to, sorry to cut you off though, Matt.
No, this is your time.
Just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about, specific to our sport. Like, I think that there's a few things that, we can change that makes it more inclusive in general. Like I think a big part of the fact that we have the same kind of like demographic playing is because of how expensive it is. And I mean, that's, not on me. It's not on Max. It's, it's kind of how it's been built. It's been built as this niche sport. Just like Max said, I think like you went to boarding school up in Mass, right?
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, like I went to private school at St. Stephen's and St. Agnes. Like my uncle played in college and he went to Pingree. Like it's always kind of been built as that sport. And I think like some of the stuff that, needs to change is, we need to bring this sport into certain areas that historically don't have it. And just using a personal example, like PG County, I remember back when I was in college, it was their first time ever having like a varsity team. So really tried to spearhead that. And one kind of snag, and, something that I'll throw out to you, Matt, I mean, like, I'm not going to let you just off the hook here either. These kids would, come back, from their schools, which were predominantly schools of color, and say, hey man, like, I don't want to play the sport anymore. Like I'm getting, crushed at school because I'm carrying around the stick that no one knows like what it is. And the people who don't are saying it's a white boy game. Like, why the heck are you playing it? And I know that you had to deal with that and I had to deal with that. And to me, that's also, a big issue. Like if you look here in Baltimore County, teams are here. Kids do have, like the resources to play it. But how much of an impact do you think culture has on kind of changing this overall wave of what we think like the sport should look like and how like, we can get more people playing it?
I would say, and I've learned this just from these conversations because I was growing up in Summit, New Jersey when I did in the 80s, or I graduated early 80s, so I guess it was 70s and 80s. there were, I don't know, 3 or 4 black players on the team, which is a lot for middle school and high school going through that time frame. I was blessed to be very good, so I think that made a difference. And I didn't have a neighborhood situation that you're explaining, Isaiah, luckily, that, you know, people didn't chastise me for playing the sport. I did play basketball, but I did play lacrosse. My brothers all played, but they played football as well. So there was having a lot of kids in our town, brothers and sisters in the town. So it made it, I think, a lot easier for me. I'm sure my older brother, when he played, he went to Boston College, and I think he played a little club ball or something. I'm sure he had probably had a different time. But I think that what I'm learning on these calls is that groups like Harlem Lacrosse, Oakland Lacrosse, Bridge Lacrosse are doing great work in areas that are, I guess, underserved or not traditional, non-traditional areas. Let's just say that, inner cities and things like that. And one of the big things we've learned is that if you educate young players on the history of the game, for me, I always tell this story every call. I was excited because it was an American Indian sport. And I knew I had a great grandmother that was Native American. So I immediately kind of associated the sport with that aspect from the historical point of view, and not as a lily white private school, prep school kind of game. And I always carried that with me. And back to your point, Max, of not, or Isaiah, excuse me, your point of kind of not looking for things. I didn't look for it when I was younger. I just was one of the guys on the team. So it made it a little more comfortable. But I do believe that the expense, and that's something that, you know, I kind of shudder. I know a lot of people at different companies, and I almost want to say, can we get like 5 different lacrosse companies on a call like this and just like agree to like somehow, you know, where they can maintain themselves as a company, but put a $150 package together that gets a kid an outfit instead of whatever it is, $350 an hour. I don't even know how much it is. So, but yeah, that's a good point. I mean, to Max, you're doing your face-off clinics, and I think that's a great way for you to reach out and just pluck kids, like kind of what you did, but you might even do it in a way you're just pulling a kid and being like, hey, I see you face off. You want to come to my clinic? And, you know, talk to the parents, and if it's something that you can do, and just once or twice the guy gets a clinic with you and improves himself that way. But yeah, it's definitely a global issue. There's other countries that are playing that are struggling for gear. I'm learning more about the international game, and having gone to Israel in 2018 and working with a bunch of the Africa groups, and now doing another project with some of the Jamaican and Mexico and some of these other groups in Pala. It's a worldwide issue, is the gear, is that startup gear and maintaining the gear, Isaiah. So you're a new true lacrosse rep, so I feel like we're going to have some type of side garage sale going on. No.
I don't know, man. I'm just trying to, change, the sport a little bit. And, I'm trying to, like a question that I got a lot kind of in the MLL bubble, right, is, Max and guys asking like, hey, like, how can we help? Like, what can we do to like help this sport grow? Because at the end of the day, I mean, when you get to kind of our level, like all that, or 99.9% of that BS, as far as from a teammate to teammate perspective, isn't there. Right. It's like the most genuine people, like the best players, and the players that want to see a change and want to see the sport grow, because it benefits everyone, involved.
Right.
But if this was a more like well-known sport, that more people played and, made more money, Max, he'd be making a bazillion dollars like at his face-off clinics. Right. So it benefits everyone at our stage. And I don't necessarily know if I have the end all be all answer. Like I can just give them like kind of little tidbits and, what I think is important. But that's something that I think needs to get, put on paper, right? Just kind of something that everyone can go to and say, hey, here's the organizations, the things that have been proven to work in expanding like the game, and here's where you can put like your time in specific areas.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just a quick, I guess, kind of question. So what you just said about like the face-off clinics, and yeah, facing off is really a position. I mean, I didn't really pick it up till I got to college. So it's a position that you can learn really, really quick and become pretty good at. So I guess my question is, because one of the things I say before and always is, I never want someone not to come because they can't afford it. So talk to me. And there's definitely, times where I've let kids come for free. I'm sure some people have taken advantage of it, but that's fine because I'd much rather, get taken advantage of in that regard than have someone not come because they can't afford it. But, how do I guess, recruit or get, I would love for my face-off sessions to be more diversified. I guess, how do I do that without, just singling people out? Or, yeah, I guess kind of where do I start and how do I go about that? Because really all the club teams that are around me cost so much to get into, and it's predominantly white in Connecticut. So I guess how do I diversify, my face-off clinics?
Mute.
Yeah.
I would think the start, and I just actually, as we're speaking, I'm trying to text Kyle Harrison because I remember him saying he was going to compile a list of the different programs. Something Coach Tiffany said on the show was that we should just, there's a lot of programs out there, let's just expand their reach. Harlem Lacrosse, I keep using that as an example, Bridge Lacrosse, and there's a number of programs like that around. Trying to think of some of the, well, Harlem's Northeast, but there's some other ones that I know of in Baltimore. But I would think, Max, that would be a place to start, is to look at those programs. If there's one in your area, contact one of their administrators and just say, hey, I've got 2 spots at my next clinic. Can you send a kid over that's worthy, something like that? Maybe that's.
Do you not have like anything like that, Max?
I mean, Harlem's the closest, and something you were saying, like compiling like a list. Like, I'd love to be on a list that, says if you like, these are a list of clinics where you don't have to pay. I'd love to get, more kids in or something like that, and be on and put my name on that list of doing, free type clinics. Because, for me, I work full time. I do lacrosse because it's fun, and I coach because I love to coach, and I was once in their same shoes. And, I would love to put my clinics on a list and say, anyone that can't afford to come, still come. If you've never faced off, still come. So
I'm writing this down, and I guess I'm taking on another task. I like it. But it's been so, I think it's true. It's how do we connect, to your point, Isaiah and Max, is just let's connect the two, and that will in and itself bring that cost down. Because I ran a summer camp for years, and every time I did it, once I hit X number of kids, I knew every 5 kids I had, the 6th kid I could scholarship. And so and since I ran it myself and kind of saw the things coming in and could tell, like, oh, from a zip code here or there, or I'd reach out to a high school coach and just be like, hey, I've got 3 of your players signed up. Give me somebody should be worthy as a scholarship. And, you do it that way. But it takes time. And like you said, you're full-time working and so forth. But yeah, I think it's long overdue, and I'll check with US Lacrosse because I know they have some ties to different programs. But on the other end, you just mentioned the key point, is have a list of agreeable vendors that are going to say, like, just link them together real quick, because it does take time. And I think people don't realize that lacrosse really isn't, for the most part, a full-time gig for a lot of you. It's very like 3 different hats you wear part-time. And it's, I think sometimes people overlook you guys. and think, oh, they're just, hanging around their apartment every day and they just play lacrosse 6 months a year. That's all they do. And they forget that like you actually live and eat and pay bills and have concerns and raise families and stuff like that. To where you don't have time to just do everything lacrosse. So I think that's an important point. And yeah, at some point we are going to have to come together and ask manufacturers if there's a way to without, some wealthy donors just saying, hey, I'll give you $100,000, cut the price for this stuff and sell it this way or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like for me, like, I've done so much work in like DC and like PG County because I'm from here, right? Like I'm from that area. Like I know that area. Like I know those people. Like I know those coaches. Like I grew up with them. So like that was kind of a perfect recipe. And, I think that, I mean, like the guy said, I mean, like our governing body just needs to do a better job because we have all these people who are willing to do all these things. Like I guarantee you if I, had a free clinic where no one was getting paid and it was here in Baltimore, like I could, like people would show up and like people would be willing to coach it. And that's the same thing. Like you have all these pro players and guys who are educated with the sport all over the country. And like, there's no one really saying like, oh, okay, like I'll dedicate an hour or two of field time to this clinic and this person is going to be there. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, like that takes people who are, bigger, like financially than me and Max. So like, to me, that's step one. I mean, like we can, say that, like we're, like more than willing and, we'll do whatever, but at some point, someone who's in, the governing body of the sport needs to say, oh, okay, like this is what we're doing.
Right. And I think another thing that comes to mind that can be done, I know San Diego well, obviously, because I live here, but there are high school teams in town here that are in a part of the county that's non-traditional. They're Hispanic, mostly Hispanic, because that's a big influence we have here, being so close to the border. And they have teams, and sometimes I look at some of the teams, and it just happens to be north and south the way it's situated in North County, that have 5 coaches, all the gear and everything brand new every year. And it's no fault of their own. It's just the economics of it. But sometimes I'm reffing games and I think, geez, if just one of you coaches could coach at one of the other underserved schools where it's just a teacher, like there was a teacher for years that just ran his program. Nicest gentleman, knew nothing about lacrosse, but he knew he was keeping kids out of trouble. And you could always hear him trying to impart good lessons. They just weren't skill-wise. So if there are players out there and you're in an area where you can get to there easily, I know it all depends on your scheduling and such, but even just not becoming a full-time coach, but maybe volunteering an hour or two on a consistent basis with a program like that would help. And obviously a player of color, if they're able to do it with other players, younger players of color, it's always great. But I think it's welcome to anybody, really. It's just a matter of, do you have the time? But the big message you're both saying is like, we need a linking system to link this up.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we can ask of a U.S. Lacrosse start there and see what they're doing. They might already be doing it. And we just don't know. Maybe it just needs to be better publicized.
Well, I mean, yeah, I would think that would be something that we should probably get first.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, like if it's happening, like, there's no reason why we haven't seen it.
Right. Well, this is good. This is good. What else? What else is on your mind, Isaiah?
I mean, naturally a lot, right? Like, I mean, and I've said this a lot, right? Like, I do a lot of coaching kind of all over the place, and like kind of bring it more nationally, and I'm seeing all these protests go on and kind of, everything happening, and kind of like the message that I've like tried to preach is, in my opinion, like I think there's an issue with the justice system in general. But I mean, I think, me as like a black male, like I'm not going to ignore the problem that we have internally in our culture and in, our areas either. And I think when I kind of say like, all right, well, there's an issue with the justice system and, what's going on, but, there's also an issue inside of our areas. And I think when I say that, man, that thing spins out of control and people get real upset with me. But I say, look, what I want to see is, just better education. And that's how I've tried to, use my platform. Like, I think that better, just better, education, more resources solves both problems at once. I mean, I think if you have a better educated, a population, like you have less crime, like you have less people like struggling to get by. And in my experience growing up where I did and kind of seeing what I saw, like that was a major issue. Is one, like the value of school like wasn't there, but in my opinion, the value of school like wasn't there because like there wasn't any funding in any of these schools. Like I live in Fells Point now. If you walk like down the street, there's like a middle school. There's a middle school and there's a high school. I think it's Dunbar. And I mean, I'll drive through Baltimore and I swear like half the kids are always outside, playing around and not actually in school. And I've been here for 3 years. So it's not just because of COVID. It was back when school was actually in session. And to me, that was like a major issue. And I mean, like 9 times, like out of 10, like I would see those same kids, like, getting in trouble. So, I mean, like I'm one of those people that's not willing to, fight one and ignore the other side either. So, I mean, that's kind of where I've tried to be as open-minded as possible, like read the news and, anything I'm reading with an understanding of the facts and kind of what's going on nationally and, what's been going on for a long time. And I feel like that's what's getting lost here. And I think that's why I've gotten a lot more traction inside of our sport as well. Because, I mean, I'm not dismissing anyone's point. Like, I understand, like, people's point. And I understand where people are coming from. But I mean, I just, like, there's a whole issue here. And I think that nationally, they're only fighting a really small piece of the overall pie. And I mean, like, just like Max said, I mean, like up until recently, I wasn't an expert in this. I didn't know anything, like, I mean, I probably knew just as much as Max, like, aside from my personal experience. But, I've tried to do a good job of listening and, like a good job of kind of speaking out and saying my point and hearing theirs. So I think that's kind of been a positive of what's been going on nationally is that people have been listening, people have been talking to each other. And doing a lot of learning. And, speaking with Max, that's, really what he's done a great job of is, like he might not understand, but he's going to make sure that he reads up and then he learns. And I think that that's what we need more of nationally.
Max?
So, yeah, something that's kind of been on my mind. I appreciate that, Isaiah. And yeah, it's just, I think so important to just learn as much as you can and hear, different perspective, different viewpoints. I've, talked to my super conservative friends to hear their points of view too. I've talked to just trying to talk to as many, different people as I can to just try to understand where people are coming from and not divide, but bring together. But kind of something that's been on my mind is, Isaiah, you were saying, in going to prep school, like lacrosse is looked at, in my experience, and it sounds like your experience too, as a white, rich sport. Obviously, there's exceptions. Obviously, that's not true, but that's a stereotype. And we always talk about growing the game and wanting to break that stereotype. And I mean, for example, like with the MLL and what you guys did with what you did for the national anthem, not my place to say how to protest, but I thought that was, couldn't have been more respectful, couldn't have been a better representation of our sport. And I know they've done stuff now, but, to not take advantage of that in the moment. And when I say take advantage, I just mean using it as a platform and be like, these are the people representing our sport. use that so different kids can see it. And the, African American kids I coach, they can see it and say, hey, look, there's someone that looks like me. Like, I'm really going to stick with this sport, even though, everyone's like, oh, it's a white, rich sport. And I think, saying, oh, we want to grow the game and then not having actions that correlate with that, it's like, there's just, they're missing there. And it's like, let's showcase this. Let's promote this. And, I think you can't just sit by anymore. And I used to just sit by and say, I'm not going to get involved in like politics. I'm not getting involved in any of that. I'm here to play lacrosse. And I mean, you guys, not only like for game days, like, different companies or whatever will be like, oh, can you do an Instagram takeover or whatever? I say, no, I just want to focus on the game. I'm really just concerned about winning, and that's it. And for you guys, you have to deal with, taking a huge stand, figuring out what you're going to do for the national anthem, having a million different people in your ear, coming together and doing that. And then, people, saying bad things, it not being showcased, people not agreeing with you, both white and black people not agreeing with you. And, it's like you also have to play a lacrosse game and try to win a lacrosse game. So, I mean, to me, it's just kind of ridiculous. And that's, something that's really bothered me, because I definitely have empathy for you guys, but it also pisses me off because I don't want, my sport to be looked at, and the sport not my sport, but the sport I play to be looked at as a white rich sport. And that's it, because we have such incredible people, involved in playing the game.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, like, and just kind of add to that, I mean, I think you're spot on, right? Like, I mean, and I think that Max is more vocal than a lot, but I would say at our level, that's generally where people sit. Is, I mean, like, they don't want this to be seen as like a rich white person sport. Like, they want it to be, more nationally like recognized. And, I just think that it's in order to make the locker room and the sport more inclusive, because people can skate by this sport and never really have to talk with anyone of color and have to like deal with a situation like what I have, being, a person of color, Max has being, someone who is Jewish playing the sport and hearing certain things like, basketball and football, like everyone was trying to use like that example for us. And they were like, oh yeah, well, like I work in basketball or, I work in football. So I get it. And I'm like, man, trying to compare this to those sports is apples and freaking oranges, right? Like it doesn't correlate. And I think that's kind of what makes solving the culture issue in lacrosse so difficult is, the fact that there's not really like some kind of baseline or some kind of formula that solves this issue of, diversity. So I like, to me, that's step one. And I mean, you were saying earlier, like that you were going to like reach out to certain like governing bodies and try to merge that gap. But, I think in a large sense, like the racial makeup of lacrosse and kind of how it looks, it reflects what's going on nationally better than any other sport. Like, I mean, like I think football and, basketball are big outliers, and they don't necessarily, like represent what's going on nationally. And they don't, and I mean, I know for a fact that's not the demographic of the estates and like what the U.S. looks like. And I'm speaking like specifically about the like player level. Obviously, like ownership's different, but I'm speaking about at the player level.
Yeah, you're speaking on the makeup of the game, so people don't misunderstand you.
Yeah.
Because basketball is, and I'm just throwing something out. I have no idea if this is accurate, but I think it's got to be like 85% black players of color.
I mean, probably more, I would think, right?
Yeah, it's way more.
Yeah. And football is a high number too. So yes, I exactly. You can't compare the two sports that way, nor really it's traditional versus non-traditional sports. You really can't compare either. So
you'd be shocked at how much that comparison got made to me and Max.
Wow.
Like, I mean, that's kind of like, I mean, and people who I've talked to, even outside of like the room that Max was kind of talking about, like, that's kind of been what people have tried to like emulate. Is say, okay, like, you know, basketball and football do this as far as like diversity, like, you know, like, let's do that too. It's like, wait, hold on, like, there's more opinions that we have to worry about here. So.
Wow, that's interesting that players, but I agree. I'm glad you guys both said that when you get to a certain level, you really do, what you're saying is you got to that stewardship level. You really care about the game and how it's perceived by others. And you're wanting to be guided. And I think those people in those situations, I don't like to put U.S. Lacrosse on the spot because I think they get a raw deal sometimes publicly, but they are a national governing body. So in this example, I'll use them. But you know, folks there can reach out and know they can reach out to players of your stature, and just ask them to do certain things. Like you said, you know, if there's a network of clinics and schools and what have you, and you know, you can drop in on a school once every Wednesday for an hour. That's probably going to do gangbusters for that program, you know.
Yeah, and I don't want to like, they're working on it. Like Steve's like spoken with me and you know, some of the other guys in my league, and you know, trying to have some kind of, you know, baseline list of things that they can get done in order to try to grow the game. So I don't want to act like I'm talking down on the government.
Yeah, no, I wasn't throwing you under the bus. I just know, and I've been trying to wean myself off social media, believe it or not, because it's draining right now. It's bizarre, and I'm an older guy, and it's too much for me. I couldn't imagine being one of you guys, where you've got thousands of followers and everybody has an opinion, and most of them are just these hidden opinions on social media. They lob on you and they don't realize, like, you take it to heart and they say something just completely out of left field, you know. So these conversations are important to have and to continue to have, but they have to lead to action. And I think that's what you're both saying is we want to take action. I would say we could end it up here. I'm going to let you each, you know, riff for a little bit on your own kind of ending statement or closing argument. And again, I appreciate you both just being willing to chat honestly about this topic, and I hope people that watch get something out of it. And whoever wants to go first, who's I can't say who's more handsome. That'd be weird. Who's older?
I'm 26.
Max is older.
Am I 26? How old are you?
I'm 25.
Oh, wow. All right, so I'll go first, I guess. So I think it's just, you know, there's somewhat hesitation from me to do stuff like this because, you know, especially the culture we're in, which is like, you know, you say something wrong and you're kind of canceled, let's say, or, you know, then like you're dragged forever. I think it's just important that, you know, you're open and willing to learn, even if people have different viewpoints. You know, I mean, just like, for example, the Colin Kaepernick, him kneeling for a flag, I think when that first happened, a lot of people, you know, their gut reaction was, that's ridiculous. How can you do that to the military? And, you know, to be honest, I kind of, when it first happened, when I first saw it, I kind of was like, yeah, like, I think that's disrespectful to do. And then having seen an interview where he actually spoke with a Navy SEAL, and he was like, you know, that's the most respectful thing you can do. That, you know, honors the people that have fallen for the flag, and that's one of the most respectful things you can do. And understanding why he did it, I mean, my opinion completely did a 180 from, you know, my initial reaction when I first saw it to actually, you know, being informed and, you know, knowing and understanding what happened. So I just think it's, you know, really important that we educate ourselves and have these difficult conversations with the risk of, looking bad. I've honestly never had a conversation like this, especially, publicly. So yeah, there's definitely risk, but I think I am coming from a good place. And, if I make a mistake, I make a mistake, and I'll hopefully get better and move on, but I can live with that. But, now I think, you can't sit on the sideline anymore. It's really important to get involved. And even from this conversation, I've learned, a ton, and, how I can help better, and, ways I can approach things in different people's viewpoints. So I guess that's kind of what I'd, walk away with it as.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Isaiah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that was great. And, I think, when you asked me to pick someone who was a white player to, come and talk, it really, I really had to think, right? Like, I really had to think about who would be, open-minded, who would be vocal enough, and who would feel, comfortable enough saying kind of their point. And I think that that's something that, we can all get better at. I mean, I think that for me, that came a little bit more natural, but for a lot of people, and what I've been hearing, it's either one side, downplaying like the other, or vice versa, instead of trying to understand why people think a certain way. Like for me, someone saying, something that I would, disagree with, which is there's no issue with cops, there's no issue with the justice system. I mean, maybe that person knows something that I don't. Maybe I don't 100% understand why he's saying that. And I feel like something that's unfortunate now is that these arguments are so polarizing that people feel like they have to jump on a side. And in my experience, when someone says that, that's rarely how they actually feel. Like, they just feel like they have to jump on a side. So, I mean, so my only piece of advice, and kind of what I've taken from this, and, what I've been trying to tell people, over social media is, hey, try to have those tough conversations, and kind of like Max said, be open-minded, and don't just don't just hear them and not actually, don't just listen and not actually hear what they're saying. Actually, dive a little bit deeper, ask them questions, and make sure that you thoroughly understand their point, because they'll probably, teach you something. So the more and more of these conversations I have, the more and more I learn, and the more I've, kind of formed my own opinion about things. And I think that's what's important, and I think that's what needs to happen more nationally right now.
Yes, I agree with you both. You both stated so eloquently. Listening, internalizing questions, and Max, I love your term, coming from a good place. And I don't think you should ever hesitate on having a conversation like this. I think you have very well thought out statements, and the fact that you said I'm okay with being wrong is exactly the way I feel, because I've had friends, and I don't know if this happened to you, Isaiah, but they're calling me, one, to check up on me, which is great. I love it, and I wish every friend I had would do that, because it's okay to do, in my opinion. But two, they're looking for answers, and I'm like, I don't have them. I'm reading a ton. I'm listening to you guys. I'm holding these conversations. I've never read this much in my life. I've got 3 more books stacked up that just came in from Amazon, and I'm listening to people. And when I get tired, I just take a day or two and I don't think about it. And that's what happened to me the last week. I didn't do one of these shows for 2 weeks, because I realized, I woke up and I was like, I'm tired. I gotta let myself rejuvenate a little bit. So speaking with you guys and giving me that energy again, so I thank you for that. I will do my best to follow up with some of the folks I know to get this list together and offer the help there, because I do believe that's something that's come up more than once in this conversation. And maybe I'll have the balls someday to talk to a few equipment manufacturers that I know, because if something can be done there, that's always good. You guys keep encouraging your players and fellow coaches and things of that nature to speak up, have these conversations. You're welcome back anytime. I very much appreciate the time, the honesty, and the openness. So I hope the lacrosse community benefits from your leadership.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And I mean, like, I want to say, thanks, Matt and Max. Max, like, thank you for kind of, like, stepping out there. That means a lot to me, and I'm sure it's going to, mean a lot to everyone else. And Matt, thank you for giving us the forum to kind of speak. So.
Anytime, my friends.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I mean, I love talking to you, Isaiah, and I love just, being part of this, learning more, and, seeing how we can make, the sport better. And I say, because I think it does take, both sides and everything exactly like this to come up with actionable items. So I really, really appreciate you guys having me on. And, I'm here if, any way I can possibly help. So appreciate it.
Post a question to the panel by emailing us at ot@emwf.org. We'd love to hear from you.